Let's talk a little bit more about how complex a brand story can be, and a little bit about why that might be important for us to kind of think about. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McColl. Through this video you're going to notice some location changes. I just happened to be escaping the house on the weekend and had my camera with me, so just thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I filmed something here. So I have filmed something on the coast near my house. I quite like the way that worked, but you'll hear some screaming seagulls and some other things. It got to the point where I really just couldn't finish the video. So I'm going to start chatting to you here, then we're going to move to the coast, and then I'll probably finish back here in the garage. I said before that a watch brand story is kind of complicated because there's lots of parts to it, and the longer a brand's been around and the more things it's done, the more complicated that story is. So if you start with like just the origin story, where did the brand come from? If you look at brands there, those stories are really diverse. It can be, you know, a guy in the 18th century traveling through a little Swiss village breaks his pocket watch or his chronograph for his carriage, and some little kid fixes it, and that kid falls in love with the idea of watches and then becomes a watchmaker. Or it could be the little farmers in the valleys of Germany and Switzerland got nothing to do over winter, and so they tinker away making cases or hands or springs, and they come together and make a watch. It could be a jeweler on the make who wants to find a new business, creates this massive brand. It could be a couple of brothers crash a plane and get a story and an idea. The origin story of a brand can come from anywhere, but it does. And sometimes it's super important, sometimes it's really not, but I think it does kind of set the scene for what comes next. Probably what comes next are the watches themselves. The watches themselves start to establish what is the brand story. Do we make high complication watches? Do we make very sporty, rugged, able to do anything watches? Do we make really dressy watches? Do we make quite affordable watches aimed at the working man, or do we aim at princes and princesses? And so as part of that becomes part of the brand story. Then there's the obvious things that we all talk about. There's the marketing. We start to have advertisements, and this goes way back. The earliest days there were advertisements for brand. In fact, I've probably skipped over something. There's the decision of what to call yourself. The idea of creating a brand is itself part of the brand story. Where did the name come from? How did you decide it? Where did you put it? What did you choose? How did you choose it? These are all parts of the brand story, building a narrative around who is this company. Then they start advertising it, and that advertising tries to convey to us, the consumers, who the brand thinks they are and who the brand thinks they apply to. And again, very complicated. A brand that's been around for 200 or 300 years or over 100 years will have a complex web of advertisements where it has tried to change with the times, where its advertisements have tried to fit with where it wants to be at that time, where it sees it can get to at that time. It'll also be trying to do different things. Sometimes it'll be trying to talk to the person who buys the watch for one reason, because it's a tool used for doing things, but a different person who wants to use that same watch for something else, as a sign of status or as a sign of success. And so you've got these multiple layers of story now. The origin story, the story of the brand, the idea that the name gives you, the watches that they try and sell, who they're trying to sell them to, how they're trying to sell them to. And we haven't even got yet to the customers. All of that branding, all of that story is kind of within the control of the brand. They make choices as they go. Sometimes they're kind of hostage to the choices they made in the past. So current brand is a hostage to prior brand, and current brand is also laying down the law and setting the parameters for what future brands can be. Some brands do that really well. Some brands are very cognizant of where their current story is going to take them and what they're going to have to do to protect their future assets. Some brands, frankly, I don't think they even recognize that that's an issue, and they do it very poorly. But so far what I've done is I've spoken about, by and large, the things that the brand can definitely control, the parts of the story that can definitely say this is who we are, and that they can choose what that message is. There's a whole other section of brand messaging, brand story that most brands can't control, and that is the customer. You see, if you're outside of a brand and looking in, you don't just see the brand product, you don't just see their messaging, you don't just see their advertising. What you also see is actual people buying that product. You see actual people buying that product and using that product out there in the world. And that informs you, that forms part of the message of the brand. You might love a car, you might love everything about that car until you go down to the shopping center or until you go out on a drive and you realize that all the other people that buy that car are dicks, and you don't want to be a dick. And so no matter how much you love that brand, no matter how much you love that car in itself, no matter how much the story appeals to you, the truth is, you know full well if you're seen driving down the street in that car, everyone's going to turn to look at you and go, what a dick. And you don't buy it, because those other people became part of the story of the brand, and you don't want that as part of your story. And that is absolutely normal. And don't pretend it doesn't happen in the watch community. Don't pretend. In fact, the number of people I hear, one of the downsides of doing this outside, the number of people here I say, on one hand, in one forum, in one post, they'll say, I don't care about brand, I don't care about anything else, I just care about the watches. And then you'll see the same person somewhere else criticizing Hublot as a footballer's watch. And it's really interesting how that works. Sometimes I think, even if the brand itself might not be that important to you, you don't care about the story, you don't care about the marketing or anything, I think a lot of people are shockingly influenced by the story of the other customers, the other people who buy that brand. Now, a slight difference from that, there's a different kind of customer that has an interesting influence, and that is the influencer, the customer who doesn't actually buy the product, the customer who is given the product, is often paid to wear the product in social media, so the brand ambassador. That's a really interesting story, because I think it is very important. A lot of people would say they don't care about it, brand ambassadors, they don't understand why they exist. And there's a truth to that I'd actually agree with. I think that a brand can get by with no brand ambassadors. They're not really important. But once you choose to have an ambassador, getting that decision right, picking the one who's going to represent you and who you want to be, is so super important. Because, you know what, for most people, for most watch enthusiasts, I don't think it's about which brand ambassadors chose to take your money, which brand ambassador chose to represent Tudor or Omega or Breitling or whoever. The question is, who did that brand go to? Who did that brand think, this is someone that I would like to represent me? Do you think that, this is a brand that said, we think we're a George Clooney kind of brand. We think we're a Brad Pitt kind of brand. We think we're a whoever you want to pick, insert name here, kind of brand. So I think brand ambassadors are super important in this messaging, because not because it says anything to us that George Clooney or Brad Pitt or Lady Gaga chose to be the brand ambassador for that company. That's beside the point. They got paid, of course. They just took the gig. The real question is, what does it say about the brand that they chose, George Clooney or Charlize Theron or whoever it was that they chose? And I think that's where brand ambassadors are interesting, and again, another layer of their story. So why is this important? Why is the complexity of a brand important? I think it's because it begins to give you an idea about why people, the same, two or three people can look at the same brand, see the same marketing, see the same ads, see the same people wearing the same product, and come up with vastly different ideas of who that brand is, of what that brand's core values are. Because some people will look at a company and say, the parts of their story that are super important to me are the origin story. I need to know where it came from. I need to know who's buying it and why they're buying it. There'll be other people who are saying, I don't care about the marketing, I don't care about that. I care about the history, who actually used this watch. That part of the story is of importance to me, and I can look over other parts of the story. And so a brand has these, and if you're a brand, and if you're a brand like Rolex that has put so much effort into your marketing, then and has had so much out there over such a long period of time, marketing story, your story is incredibly complicated. And which parts of it are important to a consumer? Which parts do they stare at and go, I can't, once I've seen that, I can't unsee it, versus which are the parts where they can go, oh, well, that's by the by, that doesn't really affect me. Everyone's got to do something to make a buck. Which of those each individual of us reaches out and grabs and says, that's important to me, that's not, I can let that one go. That's highly personal. And so like I said earlier in the previous bit when I was away somewhere else, the story of a brand is really complicated, and how we pick and choose through that to decide what our vision of that brand is going to be is pretty personal and can vary wildly between individuals. And that's fine, that's no big deal. Everyone's watch journey is their own journey, and it doesn't really matter to other people what you think, except when it does. So for someone like me who talks to the world about about watches, it does kind of matter that I am aware of how I'm looking at a brand and how I'm looking at a watch. And as a result, I'm increasingly trying to think very clearly about what's the whole story of a brand, not just the parts of it that impact on me. That it impacts on me is fine. That it influences how I buy a watch is fine. But I've got to be cognizant of that when I'm talking to other people about a watch they might be thinking about, or a watch they might actually already own. Which brings me to the next point of, we should probably all be a little bit aware of the fact that every watch can tell different stories, and every watch brand can tell different stories to every person. And that the story that that person has chosen is very personal. So that when you crap on the brand of someone's watch, whether you mean to or not, you are saying something about them as a person, because that person made that choice to buy that brand. So there is always some connection, well, nearly always, some connection between a person, that person's values, and the decision that they made to wear that Invicta, or to wear that tag, or to wear that Rolex. So when you crap on their brand, you are in some way, shape or form kind of crapping on the person. So I suppose I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying be aware of it. Be aware of the potential impact you're going to make. And if you're a decent human, you might want to think about that and wind in the way you talk about watches and brands with other owners. On the other hand, maybe you don't care. Maybe you think that people should be big enough and ugly enough to take it, and who cares what people think? Oh, look, that last part's just total bull. Human beings care what other human beings think. And if any of you are sitting there right now saying, not me, I don't care what people think, you're a liar, because you're on social media. So by definition, you care what people think. The only way you could not care is to not see this video, in which case you don't care what I just said. So yeah, anyone who pretends, one of the things that's beginning to irritate me more and more is people who say, I don't care what people think, and I don't care, and say it publicly in like comments so that other people that they don't care about can read it. Makes no sense. Anyway, upshot is, brand stories are complicated. How we pick through them is very personal and relates very much to us. As a result, we should be careful about what we say about brands, because the parts of the story that we pick up might not be the parts of the story other people pick up. And that what we crap on might actually be saying some things to people that they get upset about. And who wants to go through life deliberately upsetting other people, or even doing it accidentally? Anyway, that's me. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. Now that I've spoken about the importance of brands, now that I've spoken about how brand stories work out, my next video is going to talk very specifically about a topic I made, a comment I said earlier, or my next video in this series is going to talk very specifically about my relationship to the king of watches, to Rolex, and why I don't think that's going to be a brand for me. But yeah, I'll keep that for another video. Thanks very much, and I'll see you later. Bye.